Welcome to Living Fullness, a podcast where you're invited to walk with two unusual friends through the ups and downs of the art of friendship. My name is Stina Constantine, and I'm joined by my long-standing friend, Father Sean Byrnes. And together we explore what it takes to grow real, satisfying friendships, the joys and challenges we face along the way, and of course, becoming a good friend ourselves. We hope by sharing our learning and experiences, this podcast will serve you in living your life to the full. Welcome back to episode 3 of Living Fullness. How are you today, Padre?
Very well, thank you, Stina. Very well. How's yourself?
I'm good. I'm doing well.
Excellent. Had a good day? Good morning?
Yes. Yeah. The sun hasn't quite come out yet though, so, waiting for it.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's pretty good.
Nice. I had a good sleep in, like 6:30. So it was 6:30 in the morning, wake up. I was thrilled. So,
and for those people who have watching us on YouTube, they might notice that we've changed our setting this morning too.
Yes, this is true. So we've had to record the 3rd episode today, and it's a Monday, so seminary's in session. Public holiday in Australia, but the seminary doesn't. We don't take public holidays. We take feast days and solemnities. We've had to change our setting just for today. We're in my office at St. Francis College, where I'm the chaplain. So, yeah.
So if you can hear people walking in the background, we'll just blame the students here.
It's just students, don't worry. It's just university students making noise. So, yep.
So today, Padre, we wanted to chat a bit about acquaintances. I think we kind of all sort of have an idea of what acquaintances are, but we want to talk a little bit more because we're sort of noticing a few patterns happening in the world. So we kind of want to maybe start with what acquaintances look like.
Sure.
So any acquaintances that you can think of that you might like to share?
Yeah. I can think of, so I used to do karate once upon a time. I was fit. And so when I think back to my karate friends, there you go, I just use the word friends. When I think back to those I did karate with, they really weren't friends as such. Not that we were unfriendly in the way that we interacted with each other, not by any means, but they weren't really friends though either, because I didn't really see them outside of the karate setting. I saw them within karate and we were friendly to each other, but there was never any interest in sort of getting to deepen that knowledge of one another. So I would count that as being an acquaintance, someone where you hold this lower level relationship with. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you weren't sort of like catching up with stuff outside of your training or anything like that?
No, really, it was just we'd go to training, that was it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I can sort of think of, in a similar way, being a ballroom dancer, I can sort of think of a few relationships there where there are some people that I dance with that we would also catch up for dinner and things like that outside of dancing. But for the most part, a lot of those people I'm acquainted with, but I wouldn't consider a friend. But, as you sort of had a slip up before, I think we do that, don't we?
We do.
We have a tendency to say, oh, well, we're friends with this person. But are we actually?
Are we actually, though? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We're friendly with that person. We behave in a kind manner, and we even, in the context of karate, we even enjoy their company and their the way that we might encourage each other in training, that sort of thing. But there's nothing that sort of there's no connection that sits outside of that.
Yeah, interesting that.
Yeah.
So I guess what's some of the positive impacts of having acquaintances as opposed to being friends with everyone? What do you think? Can you think of any initial ones?
Positive impact. I think firstly, it means that we learn how to have conversations with people that we don't necessarily have a deep connection with or a deep interest in, and that's really part of the art of conversation. So my seminarians, one of the things that I do with them is to run through the art of conversation, to run through how we converse with people just that we don't necessarily have that deep connection with. how to initiate that. And I think that's become a bit of a lost art in the time of social media and all of that. So this is one thing that really does help us to it just teaches us how to make conversation with people that we don't agree with, or people that we're not particularly close to, people that we ordinarily wouldn't hang out with for lengthy periods of time. It assists us in that, I think.
Definitely. I can think back to a few moments last year where I was quite involved in the community, and I'd been meeting with people that I'd never met before for the first time. And a lot of the people that I met did have the ability to strike up a conversation and continue a conversation, but I also met a lot of people who really struggled. We would sort of do the whole, hi, my name is so-and-so, where are you from? And then silent. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then I would sort of try and ask questions, and then they would answer it, then silent. Okay. This is really hard. It's exhausting when you're the person trying to initiate and keep the conversation going on your own. It's quite tiring.
Very hard, very tiring, yeah. Stina was our community ambassador last year. So, yeah. Yep.
Trying to avoid not, to
I know,
say it, but
I know, that's why
Of course. That irritation part of the first episode we talked about? Yeah, there's this.
I think so, definitely the conversation factor. It is important too to have an ability to hold a lower level relationship. I mean, if you think about sort of the way that we invest in our really good friendships, could you imagine doing that 100 times over? Ooh. Could you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
a full-time job.
Yeah, it's stretching oneself thin, isn't it? That's so. Yeah, it kind of helps us to actually have good friendships because we're not deep friends with everyone that we meet.
Or we're not trying to be. I don't know that we can. Can we actually?
Exactly. Yeah.
But in the trying to give ourselves so much to so many people, I think we've really sort of spread ourselves thin.
Yeah.
It makes it quite difficult.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you said lower level friendships, was a part of me that was cringing, I don't like calling.
I just said that, didn't I? Yeah, whoops. Sorry.
But it's not like that doesn't mean that people who are acquaintances are somehow less than the people that we're friends with. It's just that the level of intensity that those relationships are at is less than those that we would have be in relationship with when we're friends with them.
I like that distinction. That's a good distinction. Less, the intensity is less than, not the person is less than. I like that. That's a good distinction. Nice.
No worries. That one's free. I normally get him to pay, and he keeps reminding me, when I give him different things that he's like, oh, I'll use that in a homily one day. I'm like, yeah, no worries. That costs $10. And he'll remind me that.
I think I've written about 1,200 IOUs at this point.
Yeah. So, as a priest, he doesn't exactly earn much. So that one's free, Padre.
All right, thank you.
What about like situations where we might end up in friendships with people that we don't necessarily want to be friends with? Like, has that ever happened where you're sort of hanging out with, you might be hanging out in a group or something like that, and you find yourself spending a lot of time and investing in people or a person that you're not necessarily wanting to spend that much energy and time with?
Yeah.
Is that something that's happened to you?
Well, I think back to school. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Within the context of school. Because you normally have a group of friends, and I sort of found that kind of in order to develop a little bit of popularity amongst that group, that I connected more with one particular person, but it wasn't really because I wanted to be in a friendship with them. It was basically that I could see that this person was kind of the popular person, and they kind of, in a certain sense, decided who was cool in the group and who wasn't cool in the group, you know. And so being friends with that person was kind of like, well, I have to do this, you know. And so I was pursuing a friendship because, you know, I had ulterior motives, really.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you had a desire to be, you know, in friendship with a particular person or with this group, to be part of this group, and part of that meant having to be friends with people that you necessarily didn't want to be friends with.
Yeah, very much.
Again, not meaning that there is something bad about, you know, these people or these people aren't good or anything like that, but we don't have to be friends with everyone.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose then that makes me think that school friendships might be one set of circumstances where that might happen. What do you think that's about?
It's a big question.
Why? I mean, desire was one of those things that we do have a desire for good, deep friendships with certain people.
Yep.
But why else? Why? What might be happening that brings us to these kinds of circumstances?
Yeah. I guess probably wanting some kind of security, perhaps. You know, because there's a security to be found in friendship, and you know, being friends by or sort of establishing a friendship by any means necessary. You know, might be one of those ways of trying to get that security. So security might be one of them. A desire for popularity or for, you know, in the context of school, that could be a big one. And instead of sort of, I think I would have been a happier school child if I had have realised that that I didn't need to be friends with the person that I thought was in or was popular, that I just needed to be friends with the person that I was interested in being friends with. That's, you know, and there's no pressure otherwise. It's okay to hold these other people as acquaintances, and you know, that's okay. And whatever the circumstances turn out to be in that regard, you know, if you're marked or branded as uncool for some reason, well, it's going to happen anyway. I mean, you know, it's school that happens. You know?
Unfortunately,
that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So you know, there's no pressure to be friends with everyone, but just to be able to, you know, pick good friends, which is a source of genuine security. That doesn't come about in a forced way.
Yeah. You're almost better off picking the people that you want to be friends with than to be stuck with people that you don't want to be.
Right.
And to be with those friends that you want to be and be labelled uncool, and to be in with a group of people that you don't really enjoy and
that's right,
and be labelled as cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I suppose that's sort of our some school conversations. I'm trying to think of what that might also look like in adult life. And I mean, there's one example that comes to mind, and it was something that a colleague of mine shared with me a couple of years back now. And she and I had been working together for a while, and she had started a new job at somewhere different. And she was sharing that they had gone to a staff function, and the function was happening at one of the colleagues' homes. And she was quite uncomfortable with the level of alcohol that was involved. That was just a bit more than what she was accustomed to. And she wasn't okay with it being her colleagues. Like, there was a certain level that she was okay with colleagues, and this was sort of surpassing that. And she was sharing with me that she felt really uncomfortable, and not that her colleagues pressured her or anything like that. There was nothing like that, but she knew that if she didn't drink the way that they did, then she would somehow be putting herself as an outsider, either because she felt she just wasn't fitting in, or because she felt that she stood on higher ground than the rest of her colleagues. So I think that kind of thing, I imagine, if it's happened to this person, I imagine it's happening in other places, in other ways as well.
Yeah. Sure. That desire to feel like you fit in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. It's funny how that kind of, I mean, it's something that stays with us, isn't it? You know, a desire to fit in. I think that desire sort of, it's what marks or what sort of makes it sort of not considered to be all that great to have acquaintances. You know, everybody wants to fit in, so I've got to have friends. You know, I've got to count everyone as a friend and you know, be a friend to everybody. And that's I just don't think it isn't feasible and it isn't true. We don't have to be friends with everybody. And you know, that fitting in will happen so much more naturally when we have good friends that we do fit in with and acquaintances that we have, you know, very clear boundaries around, because we sit in the same, you know, this is work. This is where we, you know, where we do our work. We sort of sit in the same space and we have similar roles or similar tasks, and so it makes it that little bit easier to fit in, I think, when you're not trying to be friends with everyone. Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong with that desire of wanting to fit in.
No, it's a good desire. Yeah.
And I mean, if I put my psychology hat on, I would say that, you know, there's scientific theories around why human beings have a need and a desire to want to fit in. You know, if we think about evolution and things like that, then you know, there's a benefit to that. But also, if we think about it spiritually, we belong to the one family, the one human family. So of course we want to fit into that family. We want to be a part of that family. That makes sense. But when we forego what is ourselves, you know, who we are, then I think that's where we
kind of have to draw the line.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's where things like just being friends with everyone.
It just doesn't.
It just doesn't
fly.
No, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
And so one of the other things that we also wanted to mention was underlying reasons that might push us towards things like that aren't necessarily healthy. So things like fitting in might be a healthy need that we have and a healthy desire that we have, but there might also be some things to watch out for, either within ourselves or within other people that they might be needing.
Yeah. So I guess things like pretense.
What do you mean by that?
So I guess pretending to be a friend of someone in order to further some aspect of your life, like career, for instance.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
You know, or for some kind of emotional validation or approval.
Yeah. I think we see that in different spaces too.
Sure.
People. Again, there's nothing wrong with a desire to want to feel like you belong and to want to feel like you're seen and whatnot. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that as such. But if you find yourself always needing to be validated and to be affirmed by somebody else, by, you know, someone telling you that you're really good at this, or they've noticed a particular trait, or you know, even for women, a lot of it might stem around, you know, physical beauty and things like that too, needing to be affirmed that we are beautiful and things like that. Again, which is a human desire that we have, but if we rely on someone else to always be filling that for us, there might be something going on that's a bit deeper.
Sure. There's is it so bad though? Is it sort of I suppose what's the downside, as it were, of, you know, I mean, these are the things that sit behind it, but if we do call someone a friend who isn't a friend, what's the effect of that? Like why does it matter that I call someone who isn't a friend a friend?
Sure. I guess straight off, it's just confusing.
Sure. It's a good answer.
I mean, it's outright confusing if you call an apple a pear. Like,
yeah,
don't call it something that it's not. But also, there's a level of trust and honesty that's needed in every form of relationship, and that comes from being ourselves, being authentically who we are, and having that integrity to be authentic, to be yourself. And if we don't do that in our relationships, starting with a simple thing like acknowledging someone as an acquaintance rather than as a friend, then what other things are we also holding back or masking or things like that? It just builds. It builds from one thing to another. And, has the potential then to inevitably lead us towards using someone else to fill a void that they're not meant to sit in. What do you think?
I agree entirely.
Short and sweet.
No, this is true. This is true. It's integrity. It's a matter of integrity that I'm able to call a spade, as my old man would say. Although I hope he's not listening. If you heard me call him,
you're not old.
You're not old. If you're listening, Dad, you're young.
You did it this time.
82 years young. And I guess there are things also that kind of when you're talking about confusion, when I'm dealing with an acquaintance, I know exactly where I stand in regards my interactions with that person. So when if I'm working in an office somewhere and a birthday card comes around for a particular person, I know I can just sign my name to that, and that's okay, right? But then if I have a confusion between is this person a friend or an acquaintance, or if I sort of create this thing where I have a person in my life that I call a friend but isn't really a friend, it's really just an acquaintance, it makes it confusing as to how do I relate to them at certain occasions? What do I do for them? Do I get them a present? Do I invite them to my own important functions? Who is this person to me? Are they really a friend whose company I enjoy and who's sort of helping me to grow, or is this a person that we share a common situation with, and that's as far as it goes, because it that stuff surrounding birthdays and occasions and all of that's really dictated by who are our friends, the people we want to share those moments with, and so it helps to I think if we don't have that level of distinction, then it does create confusion even around the simple things. Yeah.
I don't know about you, Padre. I mean, with the couples that you've married, for example, I don't know how much insight you get to see into the level of stress of pulling together a wedding. But as a friend, I have seen that happen with a number of my female friends, and it can be really stressful. And I think a lot of that has to do with not knowing where they stand with certain people. I mean, there are, especially when we talk about things like culture, for example, there are other added expectations on top of that. But for a lot of them, it's, should I be inviting this colleague? And if I invite, because I get along really well with this colleague, I want to invite this colleague. But, if I invite that colleague, do I have to invite the rest of the team?
Nice.
Like, well, hang on. Who puts that kind of pressure on us? Like, who's actually dictating that we have to invite these people? And why do we feel bad if we don't invite all these people? Is it not okay to just say, actually, I get along with this particular colleague of mine, I'm going to invite them to the wedding, but I'm not going to feel bad about not inviting the rest of the team, because the reality is the rest of the team and I, we're friendly with each other, but we're not that close.
Yeah, exactly.
That's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. No hard feelings.
Yeah. Yep, spot on. And that's I think that's I've not seen that as someone who has married couples. Admittedly, the last 4 years I've kind of been in a situation where I'm not really in the parish setting. But I've, generally speaking, as a priest, tried to stay about as far away as possible from the organisation of the wedding itself, and just taking care of the most essential part, which is the marriage. So when it comes to the organisation of who's coming and everything like that is your business.
That's probably sensible.
I ain't getting entangled there.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So I think also a question that will be asked, especially from those of you who are of a Christian faith. I think there's a belief that we hold that because we're Christian, we need to, as Christians, we need to be laying down our lives for others. So how do we then reconcile that with not being friends with everyone?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we God calls us to love our neighbour as ourselves, right? I mean, he calls us to love everybody, but loving everybody doesn't mean that we have to be friends with everybody. And so, if we were to be friends with everybody, then sort of love would be the same for everyone. But that's not really how relationships work. The notion that love is the same for everyone is simply untrue. I mean, the love that exists between friends, and the love that exists between parents, and the love that exists between spouses, these are three different kinds of love. They're not the same. So yes, we're called to love everybody, but we're not called to love everyone the same way. And so some people who we love them at the level of an acquaintance, and that's not just okay. It's in fact, it's a good thing. The reality of our Christian call is that we're called to love our brothers and sisters. We're called to love our neighbour, and our neighbour is essentially everyone, right? Well, that relationship of brother and sister in Christ is actually a more fundamental relationship than any individual friendship. In fact, it's so fundamental. It's even more fundamental than the relationship of spouses. That the relationship of brother and sister in Christ is fundamental to the Christian existence. And so, we are called to love our acquaintances as our brothers and sisters in Christ. But the love that we have for them is different to the way that we would show love for a friend who we're a bit closer to. And that is a good way of loving. It's okay. Yeah.
It's, like you said, not just okay.
Not just okay, it's good.
It's good.
It's good. I went the opposite there, didn't I? It's good. It's okay. No, it's not just okay. It's good.
Not just okay. It is good.
Yeah.
It is, and it's what we're meant to do then as Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Padre.
No worries. Thank you.
Bringing us to goodness, the way we thought we might end each of our podcast episodes from here on out is to think back on the week and share an aspect of the week that we have seen truth, beauty and goodness, just so that we appreciate the gifts that we actually do receive on a day-to-day basis, and that, as Christians and as friends, our goal is always to orient towards and back to God. So this is another way for us to put that into practice and actually be aware of what's happening around us. So, Padre, do you want to go first?
Sure.
True, good, and all beautiful.
True, good, and all beautiful. Well, I was driving to a farm on Saturday, and was taking my first years out to a farm. And Saturday's a sort of a day where we have first year trips. So I took them out to a local farm, and I was following one of my seminarians out there because it was his family's farm. So out we're going, and we got to a certain point, and I just stopped and had a look at the canola And it was just the most glorious sight. I'd never been so close to a crop of canola before. It was just the most glorious thing I'd ever seen. And so yellow, so golden, and it reminded me of that. There's a poem by Jerry Panley Hopkins, which is the world is charged with the glory of God. It was only God could create something so beautiful.
We where we are here in Wagga, we're sort of surrounded almost by canola farms.
Yes.
In some ways. So
my eyes loved me for stopping. My nose hated me. Yes.
There are some repercussions. But how beautiful. How beautiful.
How about yourself?
So I actually did something that I hadn't done in a little while, and I know it probably sounds a little creepy to start with, and it's not. I'm certain that just about everybody does this, just won't admit to it. But like just sitting back and watching people just going about their lives. It was something I used to do, at a coffee shop, sit back with a cup of coffee and just watch life go by. I don't do too much of that anymore. Thanks, COVID. But I had the pleasure of doing that after I went to church one morning, and after sort of being in meditation for a little while, I looked up and saw this couple that I see fairly regularly of a morning, and they decided to pray the Stations of the Cross together, which is sort of a meditative way of walking through the way of Christ to Calvary, through the various stages that he would have gone through. And they had one book that they shared, but neither one of them spoke. They didn't mumble. They were clearly reading from the same book that is, being shared between them. And they would move from, so with the meditations, you also have icons or images that you can move to, that can be placed around a church. So you're sort of moving around the church whilst you're meditating and praying. And this couple just beautifully would read and then would move to the next section. But neither one of them had to gesture anything to another. Neither one of them had to say, I'm done, like, are you done? There was none of that. They were just perfectly in sync, in such unity. Like, it was, I just thought it was profound.
Yeah,
it was just so beautiful and profound to see a couple it's such a small thing, but to know each other so well and to know themselves so well, to be able to work that well together was quite inspiring. So thanks to that couple.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, that takes us to the end of our third episode.
Yes, yes it does.
So for those of you watching on our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's video. We plan on doing episodes every week, so tune back in on Wednesday of next week for that episode. But also send us your questions and your comments. Put them in the comment section below. We do want to hear from you, so you can do that in the comment section below on our YouTube channel, or you can jump over to our Facebook page on Virtue Ministry, or you can go to our Instagram page, also Virtue Ministry, and send us your questions and comments there too.
Subscribe and like it.
Absolutely, and we'll see you next. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it and found it helpful, please rate our podcast and share it with someone. That just might help someone else find this podcast too. So that we can best serve you, we want to get to know you. Let us know your thoughts, comments, and questions either by joining the Living Fullness Facebook group at Virtue Ministry or our Instagram page, also at Virtue Ministry. We'll catch you again on Wednesday next week for a new episode on Living Fullness. Until then, know of our love and prayers.